The accidental glance. Daniel's spaceship trembled as it cut through the thick, purple clouds of an unknown planet. Alarms blared inside the cockpit, flashing red lights warning of multiple system failures. Sparks flew as he fought the controls, but the ship was going down fast. With a loud crash, the metal beast struck the ground, skidding through dense green foliage before coming to a smoking halt. Daniel groaned, unstrapping himself from the pilot's seat. The air smelled different, fresh yet strange. He checked his vitals. No broken bones, just bruises. His ship, however, was in terrible shape. Smoke curled from the engines, and the communication system was fried. He was stranded. Great. Just perfect, he muttered, stepping outside. The landscape was breathtaking. Towering trees with glowing blue veins stretched toward the sky, their roots twisting like ancient fingers. Strange, bird-like creatures with 4 wings glided silently above. A massive sun bathed everything in golden light. Daniel activated his scanner. He needed materials to fix the ship. His oxygen levels were fine, but water was a priority. A faint beeping signaled a nearby source. Following the signal, he walked through dense jungle until the trees thinned, revealing a sparkling waterfall cascading into a crystal-clear pool. Relief flooded him. He took a step forward, then froze. A figure stood beneath the waterfall. It was a woman, or at least she looked somewhat human. Tall, elegant, with smooth violet skin that shimmered in the sunlight. Her long, silver hair flowed down her back, and delicate markings like glowing tattoos lined her arms. Her eyes were closed as the water poured over her. Daniel's brain screamed at him to turn around, but his legs refused to move. Then she opened her eyes. For a second, everything was still. Then she screamed, a high, sharp sound that sent birds scattering from the trees. Her golden eyes widened in horror as she covered herself, her body suddenly glowing with an eerie, pulsing light. Daniel panicked. I didn't mean to. Before he could finish, the woman raised her hand. A gust of wind slammed into him, sending him tumbling backward. He crashed against a tree, dazed. She stormed toward him, her expression a mix of fury and terror. "You saw me without garments," she hissed, her voice carrying an accent he couldn't place. "Now we must marry, or we'll both die." Daniel blinked. "Wait. What?" She clenched her fists, trembling. "You looked at me," she repeated as if he was slow. "Now the curse will fall upon us. If we do not bond, we will die in 7 days." Daniel's head was spinning. Curse. Marriage. 7 days. This had to be some kind of misunderstanding. He pushed himself up, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. "Look, I don't know what kind of law this is, but I swear it was an accident. I was just looking for water." She took a step closer, her golden eyes glowing brighter. "Do not lie, human. You saw, and the spirits have already marked you." Daniel frowned. "I don't feel any." Then it hit. A sharp, burning sensation shot through his chest. He gasped, clutching his heart as a strange heat spread through his body, like fire running through his veins. His vision blurred for a second. It was unlike anything he had ever felt. The woman looked at him grimly. "It has begun." Daniel coughed, breathing heavily. "What the hell did you do to me?" "It is not I who did this," she said, crossing her arms. "It is the curse. My name is Ryla, and I am of the royal bloodline of the Olithians. Our ancestors created a law that binds fate itself. If an outsider sees a royal unclothed, the spirits punish both. Either we marry and perform the ritual, or the curse will consume us." Daniel's mind reeled. "That doesn't even make sense." Ryla sighed. "It does not matter if you believe it. You will feel it soon enough." Daniel took a deep breath, trying to think. He was stranded on an unknown planet, possibly cursed, and now an alien woman was demanding marriage to save them both. This was officially the strangest day of his life. "I need to get back to my ship," he muttered. "Maybe there's another way to fix this." But before he could take a step, a deep horn sounded in the distance. Ryla's eyes widened in panic. "They are coming," she whispered. Daniel turned. "Who's coming?" She grabbed his arm. "My people. If they find you, they will kill you for breaking the law." Daniel felt his heart pound. "Well, that's just fantastic." The escape and the deadly hunt. Daniel's mind raced as Ryla's grip tightened around his wrist. Her golden eyes, wide with panic, darted toward the jungle. The deep echoing horn that had just sounded through the trees made his stomach sink. Someone, or something, was coming. "Who's coming?" Daniel demanded, pulling back slightly. Ryla didn't answer immediately. She turned toward the trees, her body tense as if listening to the wind itself. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and urgent. "My people," she whispered, "warriors of my father's guard. If they catch us, they will not listen. They will execute you." Daniel's pulse spiked. "Execute? That seems a bit extreme, doesn't it?" "You broke an ancient law," she shot back. "To them, it is a crime against our ancestors." Daniel's mind was still struggling to process the absurdity of the situation. 1 second, he had been scavenging for water, and now he was apparently on the run from an alien royal guard for witnessing an accidental wardrobe malfunction. Another horn blast rang out, closer this time. Ryla hissed, "Move, human." Before he could protest, she yanked him into the thick jungle, moving with a grace and speed that stunned him. She was fast, faster than any human could be. Her bare feet barely made a sound on the mossy ground. Daniel struggled to keep up, stumbling over gnarled roots and pushing past thick vines. His military training kept him from falling flat on his face, but he was at a clear disadvantage in this alien terrain. They ran for what felt like minutes stretched into eternity before Ryla suddenly halted, pressing her back against the trunk of a massive, glowing tree. She grabbed Daniel and shoved him behind her. "Be silent," she whispered. Daniel's breath came in sharp, uneven gulps as he tried to control his breathing. His heart pounded like a drum. The burning sensation from the so-called curse was still there, a dull, lingering heat in his chest. Then he heard it. Footsteps. Soft, calculated, and too many. From the dense undergrowth ahead, figures emerged. 6 armored warriors draped in dark silver cloaks, their weapons glowing faintly in the dim jungle light. Their faces were covered with sleek helmets that concealed all emotion. Daniel clenched his jaw. These weren't just some random enforcers. These were elite hunters. The tallest of them stepped forward, raising a hand. His voice was calm but sharp as a blade. "Ryla of the Alithian royal house, step forward." Daniel felt her body stiffen beside him. She inhaled slowly, stepping out from behind the tree with the poise of a warrior rather than someone caught breaking an ancient law. The lead warrior tilted his head slightly. "You must return at once. Your father has commanded it." Ryla crossed her arms. "And what of the human?" The warriors didn't even glance at Daniel. The outsider broke sacred law. The punishment is death. Daniel let out a bitter laugh. "Wow. No trial. No chance to explain. Just straight to execution. Real civilized." Finally, the lead warrior turned to face him, his helmet's visor flashing faintly. "You misunderstand, human. This is not punishment. It is the will of the ancestors. The curse will take you both in 7 days if you do not complete the ritual. But my orders are to ensure you do not live long enough to test that theory." Daniel's blood went cold. These people weren't here to bring him back for judgment. They were here to kill him on sight. Before he could react, Ryla moved faster than lightning, whipping her hands in a circular motion. The markings on her skin flared bright blue, and the air around them shifted like rippling water. A wall of vines and roots suddenly erupted from the ground, separating them from the warriors. "Run," she shouted, grabbing Daniel's wrist. The vines wouldn't hold them for long. The warriors were already slicing through them with energy blades, their movements swift and precise. Daniel ran, his legs burning with adrenaline as they sprinted deeper into the jungle. The terrain was growing rockier, the trees thinning into a dark valley ahead. "Where are we going?" he huffed, dodging a fallen tree. Ryla didn't slow. "The ruins. If we can reach them, we may have a chance." "The ruins?" he repeated, but before she could answer, a sharp pain exploded in his shoulder. He stumbled, nearly falling. The thin, glowing dart was lodged in his flesh. "Poison," Ryla gasped. "They will slow you down until they can catch you." Daniel gritted his teeth. His vision blurred slightly, and his limbs suddenly felt heavy. "No, not happening," he growled, shaking himself awake. He forced his legs to keep moving, even as his body screamed in protest. Behind them, the warriors were closing in. Then, Daniel saw it, a massive structure rising from the jungle. Tall stone pillars, ancient carvings glowing faintly with a strange energy. The ruins looked untouched by time, like something lost to history. Ryla dragged him inside, her breath ragged. "We can hide here. The spirits will protect us." Daniel slumped against a pillar, fighting against the effects of the poison. This better be one hell of a hiding spot. Ryla placed a hand on his forehead, her touch cooling the burning inside him. "Do not fight the curse," she murmured. "Your body is resisting, but it will only make it worse." Daniel's head lolled slightly. I don't believe in curses." Ryla gave him a sad smile. "Then why are you burning?" Outside, the warriors reached the ruins. The hunt was far from over. The binding ritual and the first trial. Daniel's body felt like it was on fire. Every breath came sharp, his limbs heavy. The poison dart was still lodged in his shoulder, and though he had ripped it out, the damage had already been done. His vision swam. Ryla knelt beside him, her silver hair falling over her face as she pressed a glowing hand to his chest. A faint warmth spread through him, dulling the worst of the pain, but it wasn't enough to fully cure him. "You are weakening," she whispered. Daniel let out a breathless laugh. "You think?" She frowned. "If we do not act soon, the poison will claim you before the curse does." The curse. He still didn't know if he believed in it. Everything in his rational, human mind screamed there's no such thing as magic, no such thing as fate, yet his body told him a different story. The burning in his veins, the strange sensation of heat spreading every time he resisted. It wasn't normal. The warriors were still outside. Daniel could hear their voices, muffled through the thick, ancient stone of the ruins. "How much time before they find us?" he asked. Ryla glanced toward the temple entrance. "Not long." Daniel groaned, pushing himself to sit up against one of the massive stone pillars. The structure around them was massive, carved with intricate symbols glowing faintly, like embers waiting to be reignited. There was power here. He could feel it, even if he didn't understand it. Ryla watched him carefully. There may be a way to stop both the warriors and the curse. Daniel narrowed his eyes. "I'm guessing I won't like it." She hesitated. "We must begin the bonding ritual." Daniel ran a hand through his sweat-soaked hair. "Yeah, about that. You keep talking about this bonding ritual like it's the only option, but I still don't get it. What does it actually do?" Ryla took a breath, choosing her words carefully. "It is a merging of two fates, a connection that allows two beings to share their strength, their energy, their very lives." Daniel's gut twisted. "You mean like a permanent connection?" Ryla gave him a steady look. "Yes." Daniel exhaled. "You can't be serious." "I am." Silence stretched between them. Daniel had spent his whole life depending on himself. He had survived on his own in the deepest parts of space, fought in wars, faced impossible odds. But this was different. The idea of being permanently tied to someone, bound by some mystical force, it was more terrifying than any battlefield. But then he thought about the warriors outside, the poison in his veins, the burning sensation growing hotter every hour. He didn't have many options. Daniel clenched his jaw. Fine. What do I have to do? Ryla studied him for a moment, as if trying to read his soul. Then she reached into a satchel at her waist, pulling out a small metallic vial. Inside, a thick golden liquid swirled, glowing faintly. "This is the first step," she said, holding it out to him. "We must both drink." Daniel took it hesitantly. "And then what?" She met his gaze. "Then our minds will be joined." Daniel's stomach flipped. "You mean I'll be able to hear your thoughts?" "Yes. And you. Mine." Well, that was unsettling. "Any side effects?" he asked. Ryla raised an eyebrow. "Aside from sharing a soul bond with an alien princess for the rest of your life." Daniel sighed. "Right. No big deal." He turned the vial in his hands. Then, before he could overthink it, tipped it back and drank. The liquid was warm and thick, tasting of honey and something electric, like static before a storm. Almost instantly, a strange sensation crawled through his skull. A pressure, a pulling, like invisible threads tying him to something unseen. Across from him, Ryla took a deep breath and drank as well. And then, everything changed. A sharp, invisible thread snapped into place between them. Daniel gasped, gripping his chest as his heartbeat doubled, the rhythm no longer just his own. A flood of alien emotions surged into him, thoughts that weren't his, sensations he couldn't describe. For a split second, he wasn't just Daniel anymore. He was something more. He felt Ryla's presence inside his mind. Her fear, her determination, her pain. He blinked in shock. "You're..." She winced, pressing a hand to her temple. "It will take time to adjust." Daniel felt his body react differently now. The burning curse had dulled, no longer attacking him with the same intensity. It was working. But then, a loud explosion rocked the temple. Daniel and Ryla snapped their heads toward the entrance as the warriors breached the ruins, weapons glowing with lethal energy. The leader stepped forward, gaze locked onto them. "The ritual has begun," he said, voice tripping with disapproval. "Then the only way to stop this is by proving the human is unworthy." Ryla's expression hardened. "You wouldn't dare." The warrior raised his hand. "By order of the royal house, the human must undergo the trials of worthiness." Daniel exhaled. "Yeah, of course there are trials. Because this wasn't already complicated enough." Ryla turned to him, voice deadly serious. "They will not be fair. They will not be kind." Daniel cracked his neck. "Good. Neither am I." The warriors stepped back, forming a circle around them. The ruins shifted, glowing brighter as ancient mechanisms activated. The ground beneath them rumbled, stone rearranging into something new. A massive circular arena began to take shape. Ryla looked at him, guilt flashing in her eyes. "I am sorry, Daniel. I should have warned you." Daniel sighed. "Yeah, I've noticed you like keeping secrets." She looked away. Daniel clenched his fists, stepping forward as a holographic projection appeared, displaying 3 trials. 1. The hunt. Survive the wild beasts. 2. The arena. Defeat the champion. 3. The choice. Prove your heart. Daniel exhaled slowly. No turning back now. The first trial was about to begin. The trial of worthiness. The ground shook as the ancient arena came to life. Massive stone pillars emerged from the ground, encircling Daniel and Ryla, trapping them inside a battleground older than time itself. The carvings on the walls glowed with shifting energy, humming with a power Daniel couldn't comprehend. Above them, the Elythian warriors stood in cold silence, their weapons at the ready. Their leader, still masked by his smooth silver helmet, raised a single hand. "The first trial begins now," he declared. "The hunt." A low, metallic click echoed from beneath the arena floor. Then Daniel heard it, a deep guttural growl. The ground trembled. Stone slabs slid open, revealing dark tunnels along the arena walls. Daniel tensed, Something was coming. Ryla clenched her fists beside him. Stay alert, human. Yeah, I kind of figured, Daniel muttered. A shadow moved within the tunnels. Then another. And another. Suddenly, 4 massive creatures leaped out. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. They looked like a cross between a panther and a velociraptor. 6 feet tall, sleek black bodies covered in dark chitinous armor. Their glowing blue eyes locked onto him like a predator spotting prey. One creature lifted its head and let out an ear-piercing shriek. The sound vibrated through the air, making Daniel's bones rattle. Then, they charge. The hunt begins. Daniel had been in fights before. He'd faced armed mercenaries, deadly traps, and even rogue AI assassins. But this was pure, primal survival. The first beast lunged. Daniel rolled to the side, barely dodging its razor-sharp claws as they sliced through solid stone like paper. Ryla jumped over another creature, moving with impossible speed. Her silver hair flashed as she spun midair, kicking one beast's head with inhuman force. It screeched, stumbling back, but not for long. They weren't just hunting. They were playing with their food. Daniel ducked as another beast slashed at him. He moved instinctively, adrenaline taking over. He knew he couldn't overpower them, but maybe he could outthink them. His eyes darted to the arena floor. The ruins were shifting, changing, just like before. A pattern. He needed higher ground. Ryla, he called. She was already moving. She leaped onto a rising stone platform, balancing perfectly. Daniel followed, sprinting toward a crumbling pillar as the creatures closed in. The moment his feet hit the stone, it began rising into the air, just like he hoped. But the beasts weren't fooled. One jumped after him, its claws outstretched. Daniel pivoted, grabbing a loose stone and hurling it into the creature's face. The impact made it snarl, giving him enough time to kick it midair. The beast fell, crashing hard against the arena floor. 1 down, 3 to go. Ryla landed beside him. You think fast for a human. Thanks, Daniel panted. Now how do we kill them? They have weak points. She pointed to their joints, where the armor was thinnest. Strike there. Easier said than done. The remaining beasts circled them, moving with deadly intelligence. They were waiting for an opening. Daniel narrowed his eyes. You ever hunt these things before? Ryla smirked. No, but I have hunted worse. Comforting. Suddenly, one beast pounced. Ryla met it head-on, her hands glowing with blue energy. She moved like lightning, dodging every strike before slamming her palm against the creature's exposed ribcage. A sharp burst of light erupted from her hand. The beast collapsed, twitching. Daniel blinked. What the hell was that? She didn't answer. Instead, she turned toward the next creature, her expression dark. 2 more. The final 2 attacked at once. Daniel didn't have time to think. He ducked under one, twisted, and grabbed onto its armored back. The beast bucked wildly, trying to throw him off. Daniel gritted his teeth, shifting his weight. Then he jammed his knife into its exposed joint. The beast let out a shriek, staggering. That was all Ryla needed. She launched herself forward, her foot cracking against the creature's head. The impact sent it sprawling across the arena floor. It didn't get back up. The final creature hesitated, now alone. Daniel met its glowing eyes. Still wanna fight? The beast let out a low growl, then turned and flowed back into the tunnels. The moment it disappeared, the arena shifted again. Daniel took a breath. His arms shook from the effort. Then, the Alithian warrior leader stepped forward. You have survived the hunt, he said, but that was only the first trial. Daniel wiped sweat from his brow. Of course it was. Ryla's expression darkened. What is the second trial? The warrior lifted his hand. The stone pillars moved, forming a massive circular battleground in the center of the arena. In the second trial, he said, the human must face a champion of our people in combat. The crowd roared. excitement building. Then, a massive figure stepped forward. Daniel's stomach dropped. The Alithian was huge, at least 8 feet tall, his silver armor etched with battle scars. Unlike the warriors before, he carried no weapon, because he didn't need one. The warrior leader's voice rang across the arena. Face the unbroken one, or die where you stand. Daniel clenched his fists. The first trial was survival. This was war. The monster in the arena. The ground beneath Daniel felt cold and unyielding as he stared up at the towering figure before him. The unbroken one was massive, 8 feet of solid muscle and power, his skin a dark metallic gray that shimmered under the arena's eerie glow. His eyes burned like molten gold, and deep scars ran across his chest and arms, marking battles won and enemies destroyed. But it wasn't just his size that made him terrifying. It was the way he stood, perfectly still, his breathing calm, his hands loose at his sides. A predator who had no fear, no doubt, only certainty. The certainty of his own victory. Daniel clenched his fists, his own breathing steady despite the tension gripping his chest. His entire body ached from the last trial, but he couldn't afford to slow down now. Above them, the warrior leader raised a hand. The second trial begins now. The arena shuddered as the ancient energy surged through the walls. Then, the unbroken one moved. It was fast, too fast. Daniel barely had time to react before a massive fist slammed toward his head. He twisted at the last second, ducking just in time as the wind from the punch rushed past his face like a thunderclap. He didn't even see the second strike. Pain exploded in his ribs as the unbroken one's knee drove into his side, sending him flying backward. Daniel hit the ground hard, rolling across the stone before skidding to a stop. Dan. He barely had time to get his bearings before the unbroken one was already on him again. Daniel gritted his teeth. Think. He couldn't win a straight-up slugfest against this guy. Strength versus strength wasn't an option, which meant he had to fight smarter. The unbroken one charged again, his footsteps thunderous, each stride closing the distance like a charging beast. Daniel waited, timed it perfectly. Just before the massive alien could reach him, Daniel suddenly dropped low, sweeping his leg out in a sharp kick. The unbroken one stumbled. For the first time. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Daniel launched forward, slamming his elbow into the warrior's exposed ribs. A normal fighter would have winced. The unbroken one didn't even blink. Instead, he caught Daniel's arm mid-strike and flipped him over his shoulder like he was made of paper. Daniel hit the ground hard, gasping for air. His vision swam. He barely managed to roll before a massive foot stomped down where his head had just been. Enough, the unbroken one rumbled, his voice like distant thunder. You fight like prey. Daniel coughed, struggling to his feet. Yeah, well, you fight like a... Before he could finish, the warrior grabbed him by the throat and lifted him into the air. Daniel gasped as iron fingers squeezed his windpipe, his lungs burned. His vision darkened. The crowd roared as the unbroken one tightened his grip, preparing for the final blow. Then, Daniel felt something. A pulse in his mind. A voice. Do not resist. Let me in. Ryla. Daniel's world blurred as something shifted inside him. An unfamiliar energy crackling in his veins, surging from his chest outward. His body burned, but it wasn't pain. It was power. The unbroken one's grip loosened for a split second. Just enough. Daniel didn't hesitate. With a sudden twist, he kicked both feet into the warrior's chest, using the momentum to break free. The second he hit the ground, he moved faster than he ever had before. He ducked under the warrior's next swing, saw the opening, and struck. His fist slammed into the unbroken one's exposed ribs, right where the armor was weakest. And this time, the warrior staggered. The crowd fell silent. Daniel felt the shift instantly. The bond with Ryla. It was doing something to him. He could feel the energy in his limbs, a synchronization he didn't understand. His body was reacting faster, moving better, like he wasn't alone anymore. The Unbroken One exhaled, rolling his shoulders. He looked at Daniel for the first time with curiosity instead of contempt. "Strange," the warrior muttered. "You should not have survived that." Daniel smirked. "Yeah, well, I don't like dying." The Unbroken One's gaze narrowed. "Then prove you are worthy." He lunged again, this time twice as fast. But so did Daniel. The battle became a blur of motion. The Unbroken One struck with impossible speed. But this time, Daniel dodged, countered, landed blows. Each hit sent shockwaves through his body, but he refused to fall. He wasn't fighting alone anymore. Ryla was there, somewhere inside him, guiding his movements, amplifying his instincts. For the first time, Daniel felt truly alive. And then, he saw his opening. The Unbroken One swung a massive punch. Daniel sidestepped, moving on pure instinct, and drove his fist into the warrior's exposed throat. The impact echoed through the arena. The Unbroken One staggered backward, coughing, his massive form wavering. Daniel didn't hesitate. He launched forward, tackling the warrior to the ground. The moment his opponent hit the stone, Daniel pressed his knee into his chest and held up his fist, ready to strike. The arena fell silent. The Unbroken One, the champion of countless battles, lay beneath a human, unable to move. Daniel breathed heavily, his heart pounding. Then, slowly, the warrior chuckled. "Impressive," he rumbled, eyes gleaming. "Very well, human. You have passed the second trial." Daniel exhaled, slowly stepping back as the arena shifted again. The warrior stood, nodding in approval before turning to the watching Olithians. "He is worthy." The warriors lowered their weapons. The leaders stepped forward. "You have passed 2 trials. The final test remains." Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead. "Great, can't wait." The leader's gaze darkened. "The last trial is not one of strength." Daniel frowned. "Then what is it?" Ryla stepped forward, her voice quiet but firm. "The final trial," she said, "is a choice." Daniel felt a chill crawl down his spine. He had survived the hunt. He had defeated the Unbroken One. But something told him this last test would be the hardest of all. The final test, a choice of life and death. The air in the arena felt different now. The cheers from the crowd had faded, replaced by an eerie silence. The shifting energy of the ancient ruins no longer pulsed with violence, but with something heavier, something final. Daniel stood at the center of it all, his body aching, his mind spinning from everything he had endured. He had survived the hunt, defeated the Unbroken One, and now, according to Ryla, he faced the hardest trial yet. The trial of the heart. The Olithian warrior leader stepped forward, his silver armor glinting under the dim alien sunlight. His helmeted face revealed nothing, but his voice was sharp, unwavering. "You have proven your strength, human," he said. "But strength alone does not make one worthy of our bloodline." Daniel exhaled sharply. "Great. So what now? Another death match?" The warrior leader slowly shook his head. "No. Now, you must choose." The ground beneath Daniel rumbled, and suddenly, a massive stone platform rose before him. Atop it stood 2 objects. On the left, a small glowing vial filled with silver liquid, pulsing with energy like a living thing. It was housed in an ornate golden container marked with ancient inscriptions. On the right, a dagger, simple but deadly, resting on a dark slab of stone. Daniel narrowed his eyes. "What is this?" he asked. Ryla stepped beside him, her expression unreadable. "The final test," she whispered, "a choice between fate and freedom." Daniel's gaze shifted between the 2 objects. The warrior leader's voice echoed through the arena. "Take the elixir, and you complete the bond. You will be forever tied to our people, to Ryla, to this world. You will become one of us in body and soul. Take the dagger, and you sever the bond. You will be free, but Ryla will bear the curse alone, and it will kill her. Daniel's chest tightened. Wait, what? His pulse pounded in his ears as he turned to Ryla, who now stood completely still, her golden eyes locked on the objects. You didn't tell me this, Daniel hissed. You said the ritual was about survival. You didn't say it would. I know, Ryla said, her voice barely a whisper. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. He barely knew her. This entire situation had started because of a damn accident, and now he was supposed to decide whether to bind his life to hers forever or let her die. This wasn't fair. This is insane, he muttered. There has to be another way. The warrior leader's gaze was unforgiving. There is not. Daniel's heart raced. He looked at Ryla again, but she didn't plead, didn't beg. She simply stood there, waiting for him to decide. Her silence made it worse, because she wasn't forcing him. She was giving him the choice. Daniel's throat went dry. He could leave, walk away, return to his ship, return to his old life. No mystical soul bonds, no alien laws, no impossible curses. But if he did, she would die. A heavy silence filled the arena. All eyes were on him. And then, he made his choice. Daniel stepped forward. His fingers brushed the dagger. And then, without hesitation, he took the elixir instead. Gasps echoed around the arena. Ryla's breath caught. The warrior leader's expression remained unreadable. Daniel didn't hesitate. He lifted the elixir to his lips and drank. The transformation. The moment the liquid touched his tongue, fire exploded in his chest. Daniel staggered, gripping his head as a rush of blinding energy flooded his body. His veins burned as if raw power had been injected into his soul. His vision flashed white. Then, he saw everything. Ryla's past, her childhood in the royal court, training with warriors, struggling to meet the expectations of her people. Her fear, the knowledge that if the curse took her, she would die alone. Her hope, the tiny, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, Daniel wouldn't walk away. His breath shook as the bond solidified between them, stronger than before. When his vision cleared, he was on his knees, panting. Ryla stood before him, eyes wide with disbelief. You, she whispered. You chose to stay. Daniel looked up at her, heart still racing. Yeah, well, he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. I'm not really the letting people die type. She let out a soft laugh, one that held more emotion than words ever could. And then, the warrior leader stepped forward. His gaze flickered between Daniel and Ryla. Then he slowly removed his helmet. For the first time, Daniel saw the face of the man who had judged him. A scared but regal face with sharp golden eyes. Ryla's father, the Olithian king. You have passed the final test, he said. A pause. Then, you are one of us now. A new future. The energy of the arena shifted. The warriors, who had once looked at Daniel with cold disdain, now knelt before him. Ryla's father watched him carefully. You are bound to our people, to our laws, but you are also bound to my daughter. His gaze hardened. If you fail her, you fail us. Daniel stood up, still feeling the effects of the bond. He met the king's gaze, unflinching. Then I guess I better not fail. Silence. Then, the king smiled slightly. Then it is done. Ryla let out a slow breath, turning to Daniel with something unreadable in her expression. Gratitude. Hope. Something else. Daniel sighed. What the hell had he just signed up for? He had come to this planet looking for water and resources. Now he had a soul bond with an alien princess, a new life among her people, and an entire future he hadn't planned for. But as he looked at Ryla, standing tall beside him, he realized something. Maybe, just maybe, He didn't mind. The trial was over. But his real journey had only just begun. The new future, human and alien together. The arena was silent now. The battle was over. The trials were complete. And yet Daniel felt like he had just stepped into something much bigger than himself. His body was still humming from the effects of the elixir, his senses sharper, his heartbeat stronger, his mind connected to Ryla's in a way he could barely comprehend. It wasn't just a bond anymore. It was a part of him. Ryla's golden eyes studied him carefully. He could feel her emotions flickering through their connection now. Relief, curiosity, and something else she was trying to hide. He still wasn't sure what any of this meant. Then her father, the Elythian king, stepped forward. His warriors were still kneeling in silence, their once hostile gazes now filled with a mix of acceptance and caution. "You are no longer an outsider," the king declared. His voice echoed across the ancient ruins, strong and unshaken. "You have been bound to my daughter, to our people. The bond cannot be undone. You are Elythian now." Daniel's shoulders tensed. Elythian. Less than a day ago, he had been a human explorer stranded on an unknown planet. Now he was, what? A prince? A warrior? He barely had time to process before the king continued. "But being Elythian is more than a title. It is a responsibility," the king said, stepping closer, his golden eyes piercing. "Our enemies are watching. The bond you now share will be seen as a threat." Daniel frowned. "Wait, what enemies?" Rayla exhaled, stepping beside him. "There are those who wish to see our people fall, Daniel. And now you are a part of that conflict." Daniel felt a chill crawl up his spine. This wasn't just about honor and tradition. This was about war. A new role in an old war. The Elythian warriors rose from their kneeling positions, each standing tall as their king spoke. "The bond between you and my daughter has awakened something long dormant," the king continued. "The ancients foretold that one day a foreigner would drink the elixir and survive, that this foreigner would bring change, whether for good or for ruin." Daniel scoffed. "Great, so now I'm in some prophecy too." Ryla gave him a look. "It would seem so." The king's face remained unreadable. "Whether you accept it or not, the fate of our people is now tied to yours." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. He hadn't signed up for any of this. He had expected to fix his ship, find water, and leave, not to get roped into an alien war, a soul bond, and a prophecy. And yet, he thought back to Ryla's face when she thought he would leave, the flicker of pain hidden beneath her warrior's mask. Would he really abandon her now? He exhaled. "All right," he said finally, crossing his arms. "If I'm supposed to be part of this now, you should probably tell me who exactly we're up against." The king's expression darkened. The Marek. The name alone sent a cold shudder through the warriors. Ryla's hand instinctively gripped the hilt of her blade, her jaw tightening. "They are a war-born race that has long sought our destruction," she said. "For centuries, they have raided our borders, killed our people. They want our land, our technology, and they hate the purity of our bloodline." Daniel frowned. "And what do I have to do with any of that?" The king's golden eyes burned with intensity. "Because you are the first outsider to ever bond with one of our kind. To them, that is sacrilege." Realization hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. "If they find out about me, they'll come for us." Ryla nodded grimly. "They won't just come for you. They will come for all of us." The shadows watching. A tense silence stretched between them. Daniel exhaled slowly. "So let me get this straight. I accidentally walked in on a princess bathing, and now I'm not only married, but also the target of an interstellar war." Ryla gave him an exasperated glare. "You make it sound ridiculous." Daniel smirked. "Oh, it is ridiculous." She sighed, but didn't argue. The king, however, remained serious. "You may joke now, human, but understand this. Our enemies do not play games." Daniel's smirk faded. He could see it in the king's eyes now. The weight of centuries of war, of loss of duty. He hadn't just entered their culture. He had entered their war. And then, the first warning came. A deep, unnatural horn sounded from the farthest peaks of the Elythian city, a sound that did not belong to their people. The warriors tensed immediately, hands flying to their weapons. Ryla froze, her golden eyes widening. No. Daniel's heart pounded. What is that? The king's gaze hardened. The Marek, he said, voice dark. They know. Daniel's pulse quickened. His whole body was still adjusting to the effects of the bond, the trials, everything. And now, a war was knocking at their doorstep. Ryla turned to him. You should run. Daniel laughed dryly. Yeah, not happening. She scowled. You don't understand. No, I get it. He interrupted. They're coming for me. Because of what I am now. Because of what we did. His fists clenched. Well, if they're coming for me, they're gonna have to fight for it. A slow smile crept onto Ryla's lips. Good, she murmured. Then fight with me. The sky above them darkened, shadows falling over the grand city. The Marek warships were appearing, blotting out the sun. The time for trials was over. Now, it was time for war.